Machiavelli is either scorned or considered the realist thinker par excellence. Even those who laud his realism may keep distance from his moral implication of politics. Such readings of Machiavelli have, more recently, been challenged thanks to individuals and great professors like Quentin Skinner, Harvey Mansfield, and Philip Bobbitt. Many people remember Machiavelli for his primer for princes, The Prince. However, his more serious and insightful work is the Discourses on Livy, which we covered in summation in an earlier episode. In this discussion of Machiavelli's Discourses on Livy, we will look at the politics of liberty and slavery. Where The Prince was far more practical in nature, the Discourses straddles political theory, military theory, philosophy, and practical politics. All Machiavelli scholars know that it is the Discourses which is the superior work, much like how Das Kapital is the superior work than the Communist Manifesto and Marx, even though most people read the Manifesto instead of Das Kapital, just like how most people read The Prince rather than the Discourses. That said, it is now time to examine some of the more substantive content of Machiavelli's less well-known but more profound and deep masterpiece. The Discourses is divided into 3 books and draws upon mostly the history of the Roman Republic by Titus Livy, though Machiavelli draws on other ancient works and contemporary events to underscore his points. The first book largely deals with the political philosophy and theory that he creates through his commentary on the Discourses. The second book largely deals with military theory and warfare, things that rulers and nations cannot avoid, so must have a grasp of. The third book is largely a miscellaneous collection of reflections on leadership, religion, politics, and heroism. Machiavelli begins his great treatise on the question of polities and political forms. This is standard political philosophy basics that anyone who reads political philosophy will already be familiar with. What are the forms of politics? Machiavelli breaks with tradition and asserts that there are only 2 types of polities, native and colonist. That is, cities are either inhabited and maintained by their original founders or have been taken over by foreigners and constructed by migratory peoples who are not natives of the land they build their city in. As Machiavelli writes, all cities are built either by men who are natives of the place where they are built or by foreigners. The concern for liberty, customs, and traditions, which is a major side concern for Machiavelli, is equally tied to this problem. Native cities tend to be established in liberty as they were constructed through the open association and union with neighbors. Cities that have been conquered by foreigners are almost never free. Therefore, the result of Machiavelli's assertion that cities are either found by natives or foreigners leads to his dichotomy of the cities that are free and the cities that are enslaved. The crux of Machiavelli's argument on liberty versus slavery here is that it is rooted in a genus, a beginning. A city that starts in slavery rarely becomes free, though it may become free through conflict. And this is why conflict is so important in Machiavelli's outlook. A city that starts in freedom struggles to maintain its freedom, and only through that constant struggle, that constant conflict, can the liberty be maintained. Thus, conflict is also necessary for a city born in freedom to retain its freedom. And again, you see the thread in Machiavelli's thought of the importance of conflict. A city that is enslaved can only become free through conflict. A city that is born free can only maintain its freedom through conflict when its freedom is threatened. polities and political forms are generally premised on native liberty and foreign subjection and slavery. A city that is native built but overrun, that originally native population subsequently falls under the yoke of foreign conquerors, and the city emerges enslaved. A city that is native but wards off the foreign influx, the conflict, the threat represented by the other, remains free. A city that has been founded by foreigners generally makes use of the existing native infrastructure and, in that sense, is also enslaved to the structures and systems which they have imposed onto themselves rather than build anew from the ground up. Only in rare circumstances do a dispossessed people build from the ground up. Aeneas and Rome is the shining example of this rare differentiation, and this is why Machiavelli decides to concentrate on the emergence of the liberty of the Roman Republic out of the slavery of the original Roman monarchy. Unlike the multitude of political philosophers before him, Machiavelli rejects the trifold, sixfold schema of political forms. All who are students of Aristotle might be familiar with this: monarchy, oligarchy, and constitutionalism, principality, aristocracy, and democracy. A deeply dialectical thinker, Machiavelli sees all political forms being reducible to two: republic and tyranny. A republic, res publica, is the public thing. A republic is the political form which sees all interests represented in the body politic, as we covered in our summary overview of Machiavelli's Discourses on Livy. Now, this representation does not need to be equal, and often isn't, but it sometimes becomes equal through the greater equality born from conflict that breeds a greater republic. But if all parties and interests are represented, however minimally, such a political form has the claim rightfully to be a republic. Majority rule, democratic tyranny, is not a republic, just as much as divine monarchy, single rule tyranny, is not a republic. A tyranny, then, is any form of government which does not include representative interests from all segments of society, and is thus a politics of slavery. Machiavelli makes clear his disdain for monarchy, the tyrannic slave impulses inherent to it. Monarchy is the form that is most likely to be tyrannical. Democracy, on the other hand, is the form that is most likely to be unstable. Machiavelli's republicanism is premised on the mixed constitution, but the mixed constitution, he believes, comes about through conflict, and that is the conflict that he examines in the movement of the Roman monarchy away from its tyranny to the Roman Republic, the mixed constitutional order that included the patricians and the plebeians and produced the greatest republic the world had ever seen. The mixed constitution represents all segments and factions of society. This is why it is properly a mixed constitution, not necessarily because it embodies the best of monarchy, democracy, republic, oligarchy, constitutional rule, etc., but because it mixes the interests and the desires of every group in society. Only a mixed constitution, a republic, has a claim to liberty, because all parties are represented in some form of political representation which produces the liberty and equal representation, or perhaps simply the representation necessary for all individuals to have a stake in public life. If all groups of people, all segments of society do not have a stake in the republic, then it cannot be a republic, and it cannot have a claim to liberty. Political societies that do not include the representation of all facets of society are therefore enslaved rather than free. If a political society is enslaved, it is only through conflict that liberty emerges.